Just 12 days ago, Chaya was a happy bride, wearing the wedding dress she had chosen herself as she stood beside the man she loved. But now, she was a widow. On the very night after his funeral, she quietly walked into her late husband's family distillery. Chaya couldn't stop thinking about the days when Nathan used to bring her there, showing her every corner of the workshop while talking excitedly about his dream of turning the small family distillery into a name people across the country would recognize, a dream that would make his late parents proud. Whenever he talked about brewing rice wine, the ingredients, or anything connected to the distillery, his eyes would light up with excitement and hope. That passion was one of the reasons she had fallen in love with him. But now, those precious memories only made the pain even harder to bear. She fell to her knees and clasped her hands together. God, what did I do to deserve losing the person I love most? I've never tried to hurt anyone. I've spent my whole life treating people with kindness and gratitude. So why do I have to endure this unbearable pain? Chaya broke down in tears, overwhelmed by a grief so deep that nothing in the world could have comforted her. As she opened Nathan's notebook, tears fell onto the pages he had carefully filled with handwritten wine recipes, customer records, and plans for the future they were supposed to build together. Then she reached the final page, the last words he had written before he died. One day, this distillery won't belong only to me. It will be our home. Chaya hugged the notebook tightly against her chest. They had dreamed of building an entire future together. This distillery was supposed to become the place where they would create countless happy memories. Now, all that remained was the shadow of the man she loved. She remembered what her mother had begged her after Nathan died. You were only married for 10 days. Now that he's gone, come home with me. Who do you even have left in that house? Are you really going to stay there and take responsibility for raising Nathan's 4 younger brothers? Then she remembered what her brothers-in-law had told her. We just feel sorry for you, Chaya. You deserve to live your own life. You shouldn't have to stay here carrying this family's burden after Nathan is gone. We don't want to become a burden to you. She could have walked away. She could have gone back to her mother's house and tried to leave the pain behind. But she chose to stay. Not because of money. Not because she was afraid people would judge her for leaving her husband's family only days after his death. She stayed because Nathan's love was still there, in every corner of that distillery, and she couldn't bring herself to abandon the life he had poured his heart into. More than anything, she was determined to finish the dream he had left behind, to make the family distillery grow, to let more people discover it, and to make Nathan proud. That night, for the first time in her life, Chaya drank wine. She drank to numb the pain that was tearing her apart. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her, and she fell asleep, unaware that this would be the first step on the journey that would change the rest of her life. This weekend, I want all of you home for dinner. Got it? Chaya and I will be waiting. Nathan hit send on the text to his 4 younger brothers before turning his pickup onto the county road. He set his phone aside, kept one hand on the steering wheel, and lightly patted the wooden crate behind his seat. 10 cases of oak and Ember's freshly distilled small batch bourbon were loaded in the back. The rich aroma lingered inside the cab. Once he finished this delivery, he planned to stop and buy a bouquet for his wife. He had rushed out that morning and forgotten that today marked 12 days since they got married. Their wedding photo sat on the dashboard. Chaya stood close beside him, hiding her smile behind one hand out of shyness, while Nathan beamed like a little boy who had just received the greatest gift of his life. The truck hit a pothole, and the photo slid off the dashboard onto the floor. Nathan leaned down to pick it up. His eyes left the road for no more than 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, a fully loaded construction truck lost its brakes on the downhill stretch and slammed head-on into his pickup. The sound of twisting metal tore through the quiet afternoon. Their wedding photo was thrown from the truck and landed face down among the shattered glass. 12 days earlier, Chaya stood behind the ballroom doors at Magnolia Grand Hotel, gently running her fingers over the hem of her wedding dress. Nathan's family couldn't afford one of the grand ballrooms, so they had rented the hotel's smallest event room after a friend helped them get a discount. His 4 younger brothers had been on their feet since morning. One arranged the tables and chairs, another welcomed the guests, and another worked on the sound system. Watching them bustle around filled Chaya with warmth, but she couldn't shake her nervousness. At 38, she was wearing a wedding dress for the first time, and she had never imagined getting married in a place like this. Bukayo peeked through the doorway and raised his voice over the noise. Chaya, it's time. Nathan's waiting for you. I'm coming. She took a deep breath, gathered the train of her dress, and stepped out. After only a few steps, the fabric jerked tight behind her. She turned around and saw a tall man with a stern expression lifting his foot from the hem of her dress. He didn't look at her. He brushed off his pant leg and walked away as though nothing had happened. Chaya looked down and saw a long tear across the train. She pressed her lips together, ready to call after him, but the wedding music began to play. Nathan's brothers were already waiting for her, so she pulled the torn fabric behind her, hid the damage as best she could, and continued toward the ceremony. The man who had stepped on her dress was Cavan. At that moment, she didn't know his name. Rain started falling just as she reached Nathan. It drummed against the roof while guests hurried inside to stay dry. Nathan reached for her hand, wrapping his warm fingers around hers. Leaning close, he smiled. "Rain on your wedding day is supposed to bring blessings. Don't worry, I'm right here." Chaya looked up at him. Her nose stung, but no words came out. Later, when Nathan's brothers came forward with their gifts for their new sister-in-law, the room grew quiet. Mark handed her a dark brown scarf, holding it out with both hands. "I bought this a long time ago, but never had anyone to give it to. I hope it keeps you warm." Elijah brought over a bottle of bourbon. "Dad made this years ago. We've been saving it ever since. Now it belongs to you." Darius placed a framed family photo in her hands. Their parents were still alive in the picture, with all 5 brothers standing together. "There are 6 of us now," he said before, stepping back. Last came Bukayo. He took a key from his pocket and held it out with both hands. "This is the key to the distillery. Nathan said you're one of the owners now. You can unlock the doors anytime you want." Chaya closed her fingers around the key as tears slipped down her face. She had spent 38 years alone, working as a USPS clerk, living the same routine day after day. She had believed that was how the rest of her life would pass. Now she had a husband, 4 brothers who welcomed her with open hearts, and a place she could finally call home. She couldn't get a single word out. Nathan slipped an arm around her shoulders, his eyes glistening as well. Rain continued to fall outside, but inside that small ballroom, the warmth of their new family was enough to chase away the storm. 12 peaceful days passed like a short dream. That afternoon, Chaya was folding clothes in the bedroom when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered, and a sharp female voice came through the line. "Are you Chaya? You rented your wedding dress from Bella Bridal Boutique, didn't you? The train was torn. What are you going to do about it?" Chaya sat down, keeping her voice calm. "Ma'am, I didn't tear the dress. Someone stepped on the train during the wedding and ripped it. I didn't do it on purpose. I don't care who stepped on it. The dress was rented to you. It should have been returned in perfect condition. Now I can't rent it out again. You owe me $50. Chaya's heart sank. $50 wasn't a small amount for her, especially when they still hadn't finished paying for the wedding. Even so, she didn't argue. She hated owing anyone anything, even an explanation. "Please give me a few days. I'll find the person who stepped on the dress. If they pay for it, I'll bring the money to you. I didn't cause the damage, so it isn't fair to make me pay for all of it." She ended the call and sat there for a while. The wedding had been crowded. She only remembered that the man was tall. She hadn't even seen his face clearly. After thinking it over, she decided to go to Magnolia Grand Hotel and ask to see the security footage from the wedding. At the front desk, she explained why she had come. The young receptionist made a phone call before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Security footage is private. We can't give you a copy. If you'd like to see it, someone can take you to the security office, but you can only watch it there." Chaya followed the employee upstairs. The security officer replayed the footage from the ballroom entrance several times. The camera had been far away, and the image was blurry. She stared at the screen and could only make out the figure of a man stepping on her dress. His face was hidden behind a column. She quickly took a picture of the monitor with her phone, but the image came out just as blurry. Pointing at the screen, she asked, "Do you know who that is?" The employee leaned in for a closer look. "Oh, that's Mr. Cavan." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing he had said too much. "Forget I said anything," Chaya remembered the name. Back at the front desk, she asked, "Could you help me? Does Mr. Cavan work here? I'd like to speak with him. He stepped on my wedding dress that day, and now the bridal shop wants me to pay for the damage. I just want him to cover the cost. I'm not here to make trouble." The receptionist hesitated before making another call. A few minutes later, someone led Chaya into a small meeting room. Cavan was sitting at the table with a stack of documents in front of him. His phone beside the papers kept lighting up with notifications. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "What do you need? I'm in the middle of a meeting." Chaya stopped near the door, gripping the strap of her bag. "Sir, I got married in one of your ballrooms 12 days ago. That day you stepped on my wedding dress and tore the train. Now the bridal shop wants me to pay for the damage. I didn't tear it, so I'd like to ask if you could reimburse the cost." Cavan frowned, searching his memory. He met hundreds of people and signed countless contracts every day. There was no reason he would remember stepping on someone's wedding dress. The woman standing in front of him wore plain clothes and was talking about something he couldn't even recall. "I don't remember stepping on anyone's dress. Do you have any proof?" She showed him the blurry photo. Cavan looked at it once before setting it aside. "A picture like this doesn't prove anything. You should ask the person who actually did it." "I'm busy." He nudged the documents in front of him, making it clear the conversation was over. Chaya stood there without moving. She wasn't used to dealing with wealthy people, and she wasn't used to being treated like someone asking for a handout. Her face grew warm with frustration. She was about to say one more thing when her phone vibrated in her bag. The caller ID showed the hospital. She answered at once. "Are you Mr. Nathan's family member? He was in a traffic accident. He's in emergency surgery at the regional medical center. Please come right away." Every bit of color drained from Chaya's face. Her purse slipped from her hand, spilling everything onto the floor. She didn't stop to pick anything up. She didn't say another word to Cavan. She ran out of the room as fast as she could. Cavan looked up and watched her disappear down the hallway. A moment later, he lowered his eyes and returned to the paperwork in front of him. She was a stranger. Her life had nothing to do with him. By the time Chaya reached the regional medical center, dusk had settled outside. She ran down the hallway, asking anyone she saw where Nathan was. Her steps tangled over each other as she hurried toward the emergency room. His 4 younger brothers were already there, every one of them pale. Bukayo saw her first and rushed over to catch her by the arm. "Chaya," his voice failed him. "Where's Nathan? How is he?" Chaya grabbed Bukayo by the shoulders. "Take me to him. Let me see him." The doors to the operating room were still closed. She pounded on them, calling Nathan's name. Mark and Elijah had to hold her back. Darius leaned against the wall, covering his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking. A few moments later, the doctor stepped out, pulled down his mask, and slowly shook his head. "We did everything we could. His injuries were too severe. He lost too much blood. We couldn't save him. I'm very sorry." Every word cut through her. Chaya stood there without a sound. She kept staring at the operating room doors as if they might open again and someone would tell her there had been a mistake, that her husband was still alive. Then the doors opened. Nathan was wheeled out beneath a white sheet. The man who had wrapped an arm around her only 12 days earlier, telling her, "I'm right here," now lay completely still. Chaya dropped to her knees beside him. She lifted the sheet and looked at his face. Only then did the tears come. She couldn't make a sound. Tears fell one after another as she held his cold hand in both of hers. "Nathan, please wake up. We've only been married for 12 days. You told me you'd always be here. Please, wake up." His 4 younger brothers stood around them, all of them crying. Bukayo knelt beside his sister-in-law, not knowing how to comfort her. Outside, it began to rain again, just like it had on their wedding day 12 days before. The only difference was that this time, no one was there to hold her hand and tell her the rain was bringing blessings to their home. 12 days earlier, Chaya had walked down the aisle as a bride. 12 days later, she wore black mourning clothes as a widow. Nathan's funeral lasted 3 days in Willow Creek. Neighbors filled the yard outside the family home. Everyone mourned the loss of a good man who had died far too soon. Chaya knelt beside the casket with her head covered by a mourning veil. Her eyes were so swollen she could barely keep them open. She bowed to every visitor who came to pay their respects, thanking each one in a steady voice. Whenever the guests thinned out, her body leaned forward, and both hands gripped the edge of the casket as if letting go would make her collapse. Oak and Ember Distillery had been closed since the day Nathan died. The whiskey still aging in its barrels had been left untouched. Day by day, the aroma inside the distillery grew fainter. Nathan's 4 younger brothers each kept themselves busy in silence. One tended the memorial, one greeted visitors, and another sat alone on the porch without saying a word. Without the eldest brother, the family felt like a tree that had lost its roots, while the remaining branches struggled to stay standing. On the second day of the funeral, Ella arrived from her hometown. The moment she stepped through the gate and saw her daughter kneeling in mourning clothes, she stopped. Her lips moved, but no words came out. After a long moment, she hurried over, took Chaya by the hand, and helped her to her feet. "Chaya, come here. I need to talk to you." Chaya looked up. The moment she saw her mother, tears filled her eyes again. She let Ella lead her to a quiet corner of the yard, away from the visitors. Ella looked her up and down, her eyes stopping on the black veil covering her daughter's head. Her voice broke. "Take that off. Take it off and come home with me." Chaya stared at her. "What are you saying? Nathan's still lying in there. How can I leave?" "What husband? You were only married for 12 days. 12 days, Chaya. You barely had time to build a life together. If he truly loved you, he would have wanted you to keep living, not bury yourself in this house for the rest of your life." Tears ran down Ella's face as she gripped her daughter's arms. "You were 38 before I finally saw you get married. I was so happy I couldn't even sleep. And before 2 weeks had passed, he was gone. Why stay here now? Finish the funeral, then come home with me. You're my only child." Chaya stood there, her shoulders shaking. She understood every word her mother was saying. Even so, she slowly shook her head. "I can't leave, Mom." "I called him my husband. Even if we only had 12 days together, I have to see him through to the end. If I walk away now, how could I ever live with myself? And after that, who will you have? His 4 brothers? They're not your family. Please don't say that." Chaya's voice stayed low, but every word was firm. "Nathan treated me with all his heart. His brothers have accepted me as their sister. I can't leave them while they're grieving. If you love me, let me do what's right." Ella was too angry to speak. She stamped her foot. "Lord, how did I end up with such a stubborn daughter?" A few steps away, Bukayo stood behind a column and heard every word. He lowered his head, his face burning with shame. His heart ached for his sister-in-law. Their family had become a burden resting on the shoulders of a woman who had only been part of their family for 12 days, and not one of the 4 brothers could carry it for her. After the funeral, the neighbors went home, and the Voss family's house finally fell quiet. Nathan's 4 younger brothers gathered around the living room table. In front of them lay the distillery's ledger, which Darius had taken out. Every page revealed another debt. The distillery still owed the bank a large loan that was coming due. The grain supplier and the yeast supplier kept calling to collect payment for previous deliveries. Several longtime distributors canceled their orders as soon as they heard the owner had died. They didn't believe the distillery could survive. And it wasn't just the business. Each of the 4 brothers had problems of his own. Mark, the second brother, had once worked in finance. He always looked well-dressed, but behind that polished appearance was a pile of debt he had no idea how to repay. His wife had been working in another state for years, and they had grown so distant that they barely spoke anymore. Elijah had just lost a major stage production contract, along with the income he had been counting on. Darius was still a contract teacher without a permanent position. He was raising his young son by himself and struggled to cover his monthly expenses. Bukayo had returned home after completing his military service with hearing loss in one ear. Every job interview ended the same way once employers found out. The 4 brothers looked at one another, but no one spoke. At last, Mark broke the silence. "Here's what I'm thinking. The distillery's drowning in debt, and the interest keeps growing. Maybe we should sell it or shut everything down, pay off what we owe, and be done with it." Elijah frowned. "Sell the distillery Dad left us? That's your answer? Then what do you expect us to do? I'm buried in debt too. Dad left us the distillery, but he didn't leave us the money to pay everything back." Darius stayed quiet for a moment before speaking. "What about Chaya? What are we going to do with the money left from the funeral donations?" His question left the room silent. Mark let out a long breath. "We'll give it to her, thank her for everything she did for Nathan's funeral, and ask her to go back home with Ella. She's still young. She deserves a better life than staying here with a family drowning in debt. If we ask her to stay, we'd only be dragging her down with us." No one answered. They all understood what he meant. Chaya had been standing outside the door the whole time, carrying a tray of coffee. When she heard those words, she stopped. She set the tray on the doorstep and walked inside. All four brothers turned toward her in surprise. Chaya looked at each of them before speaking. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was clear. "So you're planning to give me the money and send me back to my mother's house. Is that right?" Mark looked flustered. "Chaya, you heard us? We didn't mean anything bad. We're only thinking about you." Chaya looked at them. "Answer me honestly. Are you afraid I'll suffer if I stay? Or are you afraid you'll never stop feeling guilty if I do?" None of them answered. Elijah lowered his head. Darius turned his face away. Bukayo pressed his lips together, his eyes red. Her question struck every one of them, and none of them could find the words. Chaya stood there for another moment. Without saying anything else, she turned around and walked straight toward the distillery. That night, Chaya stayed at the distillery. The smell of fermenting grain blended with the scent of old wood from the rows of aging barrels. Everything around her reminded her of Nathan. He had spent more time in this place than he had inside the house. He used to sleep there on nights when a batch of whiskey needed watching. He had once walked her through the distillery, showing her every barrel and telling her which ones had been aging the longest and which ones he planned to save. Chaya sat down between the barrels. She drew a cup of whiskey from one of them. She had never been much of a drinker, but that night she drank anyway, hoping the ache inside her would ease. She kept drinking until her head grew heavy. Before she knew it, she had fallen asleep on the floor, surrounded by the rich smell of whiskey. The next morning, she woke with a splitting headache. As she pushed herself up, her hand struck something hard wedged between two barrels. She reached into the narrow gap and pulled out an old leather notebook. The handwriting belonged to Nathan. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were the recipes for Oak and Ember's whiskey. Nathan had carefully written down every step, every measurement, and every ratio of grain and yeast. There was also a list of regular customers, showing who ordered which products, who always paid on time, and who often asked for extra time. One section contained sketches of the expansion he had planned after their wedding. He wanted to add a bottling line and supply restaurants and hotels across the city. On the last page, he had written a few slanted lines in his familiar handwriting. "One day, this distillery won't belong to just me anymore. It'll be our home." Chaya pressed the notebook against her chest and sank onto the floor. She cried for the home she had barely found before losing it. She cried for the husband whose name still felt new on her lips. After a long while, she wiped her face, rose to her feet, and made up her mind. She could not let this distillery die with Nathan. The next morning, Chaya asked Nathan's 4 younger brothers to meet her at the distillery. She placed Nathan's notebook on the table, then set another stack of documents beside it. She had found them in his room. "Take a look." Darius picked up the papers. The farther he read, the more his expression changed. He looked at Chaya. "Nathan filed these papers right after you got married. He made you the co-manager of his share of the distillery." Chaya nodded. "He prepared them before the wedding because we planned to expand the distillery together. According to these papers and the law, his share now belongs to me. I'm not taking anything that belongs to the rest of you. Your shares are still yours," Mark frowned. "Then what are you saying? You want to keep the distillery?" "I do, but I can't do it alone, and each of you already has enough on your shoulders." She took a slow breath before continuing. "The distillery's debt is business debt. It's backed by the property and equipment. It isn't any one person's personal debt, and I won't let one person carry it alone. We won't sell the distillery, and we won't shut it down. We'll ask the bank to restructure the loan and give us more time. I have one request. Let me manage your shares for 3 years, just 3 years. That will give me the authority to work with the bank, the suppliers, and the distributors. We can protect Dad's trade and keep the distillery alive. After 3 years, once everything is stable, anyone who wants to leave can leave. I won't stop you." The 4 brothers sat in silence for a long time. Elijah was the first to speak. His voice was heavy. "You've only been part of this family for 12 days, and Nathan's gone. Why would you take all of this on?" Chaya looked at the notebook on the table. "Because Nathan wrote that this distillery was going to be our home. I've accepted it as my home too. I won't walk away while my home is falling apart." Bukayo stood up, walked over to her, and lowered his head. "I'll sign. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Darius nodded and picked up a pen. Mark stayed quiet for another moment before letting out a long breath and reaching for the papers. Elijah was the last to sign, his eyes still red. The first thing Chaya did after that was return to the USP's office and submit her resignation. Her coworkers tried to talk her out of it. They reminded her she had worked there for years and finally had a stable job. She only smiled. My family needs me. Even after gathering all of her savings, it still wasn't enough. After thinking it over, she went back to see Ella. Once Ella heard everything, she slammed her hand on the table. What? You want me to give you the money I've been saving for retirement so you can pour it into your late husband's debts? Have you lost your mind, Chaya? I've spent my whole life saving that money so I wouldn't become a burden to you one day. Mom, I'm not throwing it away. I'm borrowing it. If I can get the distillery back on its feet, I'll pay you back with interest. Pay me back with what? If that place goes under, where are you going to get the money? The two of them argued until Ella finally ordered her daughter to leave, saying she didn't want to see her again. Chaya stood outside the gate with tears running down her face. She couldn't bring herself to walk away. 3 days later, Ella arrived at the distillery carrying a travel bag. She set it down and pushed a bundle of cash wrapped in cloth into Chaya's hands. Here's my money. Take it and use it for the distillery. But listen to me. I can't let you do something this foolish all by yourself. I'm staying here to keep an eye on you. If this place goes under, then we'll starve together. Chaya threw her arms around her mother. Thank you, Mom, Ella clicked her tongue. That's enough. Let go and go make me something to eat. I've been on the road all day, and I'm starving. After taking care of the paperwork, Chaya began running the distillery. But the moment she explained what she wanted to do, Walter, the master distiller who had worked there for decades, threw down the grain rake with a loud bang. You expect me to listen to you? Do you even know the first thing about making whiskey? Chaya looked up from where she was crouching beside a fermentation tank. Walter had been with the distillery since Nathan's father's time. Everyone in Willow Creek respected his skill. Since Chaya stepped in to manage the distillery, he hadn't said a single word. Now that he finally spoke, every sentence came out sharp. I'm not telling you what to do, Chaya said. I'm asking you to teach me. Walter let out a short laugh. Teach you what? You worked at the post office. Do you know what yeast to use? Do you know which grain goes into the mash? Nathan hasn't even been gone that long, and you're already trying to take over the whole place. People are going to laugh at you. Chaya stood up and brushed the dust from her clothes. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She looked straight at Walter. You're right. I don't know. That's why I need to learn. But this distillery can't be allowed to die just because Nathan is gone. You've devoted most of your life to this place. If you care about the trade his father built, then teach me. If you're angry, you can scold me first. After that, please teach me anyway. I'll accept it. Walter stared at her for a long moment. There was nothing clever or polished about the woman standing in front of him. He couldn't bring himself to walk away. With a quiet grunt, he bent down and picked up the rake. Come here. Watch carefully. You have to add the yeast while the mash is still warm. If it's too hot, the yeast dies and the whiskey turns sour. If it's too cold, it won't ferment evenly. Touch it with your hand. It should feel about as warm as bathwater for a baby. Remember that. I will, Chaya answered. From that day on, she got up before dawn every morning to learn beside Walter. As she worked, she kept Nathan's notebook open next to her, checking every step against his notes. Some nights she stayed in the distillery until long after dark, stirring a fresh batch while reading the handwriting Nathan had left behind. It felt as though he were still standing somewhere behind her. Once production at the distillery was back on track, Chaya turned her attention to sales and raw materials. She drove from one supplier to another, sitting down with each of them to talk things through. She didn't beg, and she didn't make promises she couldn't keep. Please let me pay off what we still owe from the last shipment a little at a time. I won't run from the debt. The distillery still owes the bank money, and I'm not hiding that. But the business isn't dead. We still have customers, and we still have our craft. If you can extend us one more shipment on credit, we'll keep working together for years to come once we recover. Some suppliers agreed because they felt sorry for her. Others shook their heads, afraid she would never be able to repay them. Chaya didn't blame anyone. If one supplier turned her down, she thanked them and went to the next. After that, she went to Community First Bank with a folder full of documents. She didn't plead or ask for sympathy. She laid out everything clearly. The distillery still had its land, its buildings, its equipment, and a long list of loyal customers built over many years. She asked the bank to restructure the loan and extend the repayment schedule, explaining that the business could recover and wasn't beyond saving. The loan officer listened to everything before telling her she would need to submit more paperwork for review. The request wasn't approved, but it wasn't denied either. For Chaya, that was enough to give her hope. One afternoon, a luxury SUV pulled up outside Oak and Ember Distillery. The man who stepped out was Cavan. After their last meeting, he had asked someone to look into the woman who had come to his office asking for compensation for her wedding dress before running out in tears. He learned that she had just lost her husband and was now trying to keep a small family distillery in Willow Creek alive. He also learned that the person who had stepped on her wedding dress that day had indeed been him. Cavan had never liked owing anyone anything, not even for a small mistake. He walked into the distillery, took out an envelope, and placed it on the table. "I'm here to pay for your wedding dress. I was in a hurry that day and didn't remember what happened. I remember now. Please take it." Chaya looked at him before picking up the envelope. She didn't rush to open it, and she didn't hesitate either. "Thank you. The bridal shop did ask me to pay for the damage. You're paying for what you caused. That's only fair." She counted out the exact amount she owed the bridal shop, then placed the rest of the money back on the table. "This is more than I need. Please take the rest back." "I don't take more than what belongs to me." Cavan paused. He was used to people asking for more the moment they realized who he was. Very few had ever returned money to him. As he turned to leave, Chaya called after him. "Wait a second." She went inside and came back carrying 2 bottles of whiskey. "Nathan and I made these before he passed away. I'd like you to have them. Thank you for coming all the way here to return the money." Cavan was about to refuse, but after meeting her eyes, he reached out and accepted the bottles. That night, he poured himself a glass. The whiskey slid down his throat, smooth, warm, and rich with the aroma of grain and oak. The taste brought back memories of family dinners from many years before, when his wife was still alive and laughter still filled their home. It had been 15 years since he had allowed himself to drink anything that reminded him of her. Every memory had always brought pain, yet this glass of whiskey left him with something different. The weight inside him eased. That night, he slept through the night for the first time in years without taking sleeping pills. It wasn't because the whiskey was magical. His mind had simply found a moment of peace. When he woke the next morning, he found himself thinking about the little distillery in Willow Creek and the woman who had given him those 2 bottles. The first batch of whiskey Chaya made by herself, following Nathan's notebook, was ready at the beginning of the month. She didn't take it to the market, and she didn't sell it to anyone. She filled 1 bottle, rode to the cemetery, and stopped in front of Nathan's grave. She set the bottle down beside the headstone and sat quietly for a long while before speaking in a voice so soft it seemed meant for only the 2 of them. "Nathan, I finally made a batch of whiskey. I followed your notebook exactly. I still don't know whether I did everything right. Walter tasted it and said it turned out well, but I'm still nervous. There's only one thing I know for sure. I couldn't bear to let the smell of your family's distillery disappear. Please watch over me. Help me keep this place alive." The wind stirred the grass around the grave. Chaya stayed there until the sun climbed high before getting up and leaving. A few days later, Cavan came back to the distillery. This time, he wasn't there to talk about the wedding dress. "I finished the 2 bottles you gave me. I'd like to buy a few more." Chaya wiped her hands and smiled. "I'm glad you enjoyed them, but I can't take your money." Cavan looked at her. "Why not? If I'm buying something, I should pay for it." Chaya thought for a moment. "How about this? Buy me a bowl of pho instead, and we'll call it even. It's been a long time since anyone treated me to a meal." Cavan looked at her, unsure whether to smile or frown. This woman spoke so naturally that she caught him off guard. After a moment, he nodded. They went to a small pho restaurant together and talked over lunch like 2 people who had only recently met. During the conversation, Cavan learned that Oak and Ember Distillery had been making whiskey by hand for 3 generations, following a traditional family recipe without shortcuts or artificial additives. He happened to be preparing a traditional food festival at Magnolia Grand Hotel and was looking for a small craft whiskey to feature. "I'll give your distillery a small booth at the festival. It isn't a major contract. It's only an opportunity for guests to sample your whiskey. But you'll need every required permit, food safety certification, and product label. If anything is missing, I can't include you." Chaya nodded. If you're willing to give us this opportunity, I'll make sure everything is done properly. It took her nearly a month to finish all the paperwork. When she finally delivered the whiskey to the hotel, several chefs tasted it and praised its smooth finish and rich aroma. Chaya was so happy that she spoke without thinking. Even Mr. Cavan likes our whiskey. He even took me out for pho. The words passed from one employee to another until they spread throughout the hotel. Before long, the story reached Cavan's ears. By then, it had turned into a rumor that the woman selling whiskey went around telling everyone she knew the hotel chairman and was using his name to help sell her products. Cavan's face darkened as soon as he heard it. The one thing he hated most was having people use his name as a stepping stone. While he was still bothered by the rumor, someone came to see him. It was Dwayne, the owner of a large distillery that had competed with Oak and Ember for years. After hearing that Oak and Ember had been given a chance to join the food festival, Dwayne couldn't stand it. He sat down with Cavan and spoke in a calm, friendly tone. "Masser, Cavan, I know you're an honest man. So let me give you a little advice. Be careful with the woman running Oak and Ember. She was only married for 12 days before her husband died. The moment he was gone, she took control of the entire distillery and pushed her 4 brothers-in-law aside. A woman that greedy? Would you really trust the whiskey she makes? I'd hate to see your reputation damaged because of her." Those words landed where Cavan's doubts already existed. He didn't believe them completely, but he couldn't dismiss them either. The image of Chaya telling people she knew him, combined with Dwayne's accusation that she had taken the family business for herself, left him increasingly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Chaya had no idea any of this was happening. She was grateful that Cavan had given the distillery a chance. After hearing that his driver worked long hours, she packed a few bottles of whiskey along with some local fruit and homemade treats and asked the driver to deliver them to Cavan as a thank you. She gave the gifts with the simple sincerity of someone from a small town, never imagining they could be misunderstood. The moment Cavan found out, he took it as an attempt to buy his favor. Together with everything Dwayne had said, it was enough. He drove straight to the distillery, placed the package on the table, and spoke in a cold voice. "Take this back. I won't accept it. The only relationship between me and your distillery is a trial business arrangement. Don't turn it into something inappropriate." Chaya looked at him in confusion. "Inappropriate? They're just a few things from home to thank you. Why are you saying this?" Cavan looked at her. "You know exactly what you're doing. You've been telling people everywhere that you know me, and now you're sending gifts. Do you think I don't understand what you're trying to do? I agreed to let your distillery join the festival because your whiskey deserved it, not because of these things. Don't forget that." Chaya's face grew hot. She felt humiliated. She wanted to tell him she had never meant any of it the way he imagined, but she swallowed the words. The distillery was hanging by a thread. If she argued with him now and ruined their relationship, everything she had worked for could fall apart. She bent down, picked up the package, and nodded. "All right, I'll take it back. I never meant what you think I did. But if you've already decided not to believe me, then there's no point trying to explain." Ella had been standing inside the house, watching everything through the window. Seeing her daughter lower her head and pick up the returned package felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. That night, she couldn't sleep. All she could think about was her daughter being looked down on because their family had nothing. Early the next morning, Ella opened an old wooden chest and took out a porcelain vase. Years earlier, she had bought it from an antique dealer and had always believed it was a valuable family heirloom. She wrapped it carefully and took a bus to Magnolia Grand Hotel by herself. When she finally met Cavan in the lobby, she held the vase out with both hands. "Master Cavan, I'm Chaya's mother. My daughter spoke without thinking and offended you. Please forgive her. Our family has kept this vase for many years. I'd like you to accept it." Before Cavan could respond, Ella lost her grip. The vase slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Broken pieces scattered across the marble, exposing the cheap paint underneath. It was a fake. Anyone with experience could tell at a glance. Ella stood frozen, her face burning with embarrassment. When Chaya heard her mother had gone to see Cavan, she rushed to the hotel. The moment she arrived and saw the broken vase on the floor, she stopped in her tracks. Cavan stood there without saying a word. But in his mind, his opinion of the two women had sunk even lower. One was a woman who didn't know her place. The other was a mother willing to bring a fake antique as a gift. Chaya walked over, helped her mother to her feet, and said softly, "Mom, let's go home." She led Ella out of the lobby without lifting her head. In the days that followed, before the humiliation at Magnolia Grand Hotel had even faded, trouble began brewing inside Nathan's family. After years of living apart from Mark like strangers, his wife suddenly came back. She had heard that Oak and Ember Distillery still owned its land and buildings, and her attitude changed at once. The very first night she returned, she confronted her husband. "I'm done living like this with you. We can get a divorce if you want, but before that, you get your share of that distillery back. Your share belongs to you. Why should that widow be the one managing it? Go demand it back. If you won't, then we're finished." Mark rubbed his forehead. "Stop it. I've already signed papers authorizing Chaya to manage my share for 3 years. Things might still turn around. Then tear up the papers. Don't be so stupid. Your whole family handed the business over to an outsider. When she sells the distillery and walks away with the money, it'll be too late for you to regret it. If you won't go, then I'll go myself." Mark lowered his head and buried his face in his hands. He couldn't find a single word to answer her. The next day, without waiting for her husband, she went to Magnolia Grand Hotel by herself. Chaya happened to be delivering whiskey for the tasting booth. The moment she spotted her, she rolled up her sleeves and began shouting for everyone around to hear. "There she is! Everyone, take a good look!" This woman was only married for 12 days before her husband died, and she already took over her late husband's family distillery. "Give my husband's share back! Did you really think you could fool everyone?" Chaya stopped where she was. People passing through the lobby turned to stare. Her face burned, but she kept her voice calm. "Please lower your voice. Mark's share is still his. Everything is written in the authorization papers. After 3 years, he can take it back whenever he wants. I'm protecting the distillery because it means everything to Nathan's family, not because I want the property." "Protecting it?" the woman snapped. "That's what you're calling your greed now? My husband and his brothers were fools. That's why they let you climb all over them. I'm not that stupid. Give my husband's share back, or you'll regret it." Her words grew harsher with every sentence. Chaya endured them for as long as she could. Then the frustration that had been building inside her finally broke loose. "Yes, I'm greedy. Greedy enough to marry a man who died 12 days later and spend my life paying off his family's debts. Does that make you happy?" The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. But at that exact moment, Cavan happened to be walking through the lobby. He only caught the last part of what she had said. He hadn't heard the argument before it. All he heard was the woman accused of taking over her late husband's distillery, admitting that she was greedy. The opinion he already had of her darkened even more. The story reached Ella before the day was over. That night, she stormed into the house and called Nathan's 4 younger brothers together. "You're her brothers-in-law, and you stood by while Mark's wife humiliated your sister-in-law in front of a whole hotel? Have you lost all your decency?" Mark lowered his head. "Ma'am, this is my fault. I'm asking all of you. If you really care about her, then let her live her own life. Don't make her spend the rest of her life living in your brother's shadow. She's only 38. Her whole life is still ahead of her. Your brother died, and none of you could carry this family. Now you're letting her carry everything by herself. My daughter isn't your servant." Not one of the 4 brothers dared to answer. Chaya hurried over and gently took hold of her mother's arm. "Mom, please don't say that. None of this is their fault. I should have handled things better." Ella stared at her in disbelief. "You're still defending them? They've trampled all over you, and you're still defending them. Chaya, I don't know what to do with you." A few days later, Ella started asking around, trying to find someone to set her daughter up on a date. She told Chaya without leaving any room for discussion. "I've already arranged it. You're going. If you don't, I'll pack my things, go back home, and from that day on, don't ever come looking for me again. I can't stand by and watch you grow old in this house." Chaya held her mother's arm as tears filled her eyes. "Mom, please don't say that. The thing I'm most afraid of is you giving up on me." After a long silence, she nodded. "All right, I'll go. I'll go if it makes you feel better." That night, she sat on the porch of the distillery with Bukayo. She spoke softly, as though she were talking to herself. "I'm only going because of Mom. She worries about me, and I don't want to hurt her. Nathan has only been gone a few months. How could I think about anyone else? Even if I wanted to, I couldn't." Bukayo lowered his head without saying a word. He knew she was only going to put an end to the matter as quickly as possible. Chaya arranged to meet 3 different men on the same day at a restaurant. Her plan was simple. She would scare each one away so her mother could see that she had tried. The first man had barely sat down before she spoke. "I should tell you before we waste each other's time. I'm carrying a huge debt because of the distillery. Anyone who marries me will have to shoulder that debt with me. Can you accept that?" The man's face changed immediately. He made up an excuse and left. The second man had only been sitting for a few minutes when Chaya let out a quiet sigh. "I should be honest with you too. A fortune teller once told me I bring bad luck to my husband. I was married for 12 days before my husband died. Would that scare you?" The man stiffened. After a few polite words, he excused himself and left as well. The third man was harder to discourage. Chaya finally said, "I don't want to hide this from you. I'm seriously ill. The doctor told me I don't have much time left. I don't want you to marry me and suffer because of it." At that very moment, Cavan arrived at the restaurant for a business dinner. As he walked past the dining area, he noticed the woman from the distillery sitting with one man after another. He couldn't hear what they were saying. All he saw was a widow whose husband had died only a few months earlier, already meeting one potential husband after another. The opinion he already had of her sank even lower. Everyone thought the matter was over. But a few days later, Bukayo brought a shipment of whiskey to Magnolia Grand Hotel along with the paperwork needed to complete the application for the tasting booth. Cavan happened to see him in the service area. The young man spoke honestly and carried himself with the posture of someone who had served in the military, so Cavan stopped to talk with him. "You're Chaya's brother-in-law, aren't you?" "Yes, sir. I'm the youngest. Chaya is the oldest sister-in-law in our family." Cavan looked at him for a moment before asking, "I've heard she took over the entire distillery and pushed the rest of you aside. Is that true?" Bukayo froze. His face flushed with anger. "Who told you that? That's completely unfair to my sister-in-law." Cavan said nothing. Bukayo continued. "She quit the post office after working there for years. She emptied her savings. She borrowed money wherever she could. She even took the retirement savings our mother had spent her whole life putting aside and invested every dollar into saving the distillery. My oldest brother left behind a mountain of debt. Every one of us already had problems we couldn't handle ourselves. She stayed and carried the burden for all of us." Bukayo shook his head. "Push us aside? We were the ones who tried to send her away. She was the one who refused to leave." Cavan stood there without moving. Every word Bukayo spoke landed like a slap across his face. The woman he had believed was greedy, arrogant, and eager to find another husband had actually given up her own future, emptied her savings, and even used her mother's retirement money just to protect the home of a husband she had only shared 12 days with. He replayed everything he had ever thought about Chaya. For the first time, he realized he had been wrong about her, completely wrong. From that day on, Cavan wanted to apologize to Chaya, but he had no idea how to begin. He wasn't a man who was used to apologizing, so he chose to do what he knew best instead. Without telling Chaya, he quietly had someone help Oak and Ember Distillery finish the remaining paperwork that had been holding it back. On the day of the whiskey tasting at Magnolia Grand Hotel, guests praised the whiskey, and Chaya was so happy that several people persuaded her to drink with them. After a few glasses, she felt lightheaded. She slipped out into the covered hallway where a light rain drifted in with the breeze. She took the dark brown scarf Mark had given her on her wedding day from her bag, held it against her chest, and murmured as though Nathan were sitting beside her. "Nathan, I'm so tired. I can endure people looking down on me. I can endure what they think of me. The only thing I'm afraid of is failing to keep your home alive. Please watch over me." Cavan had followed her outside without meaning to. He heard every word. The woman he had once thought was blunt and rough around the edges looked so small sitting there alone. For the first time, he understood that her straightforward manner was only a shell. Behind, it was a lonely woman with no one left to lean on. A few days later, Cavan invited Chaya to dinner. He didn't tell her it was his way of apologizing. He simply said they should discuss the business arrangement. Chaya agreed and led him to a small roadside restaurant, the kind of place he almost never visited. A steaming bowl of soup was set in front of them. Cavan was used to fine restaurants and didn't realize how hot it was. He took one spoonful and burned his mouth, his face tightening at once. Seeing that, Chaya reached over out of habit, pulled the bowl toward herself, leaned down to blow on the soup until it cooled, then set it back in front of him. Take your time. The soup here is always served piping hot. It's not like the places you're used to. The simple gesture caught Cavan completely off guard. No one had ever cooled a bowl of soup for him in the 15 years since his wife passed away. When they crossed the street after dinner, a motorcycle sped past the edge of the road. Chaya reacted without thinking and grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Their hands touched. His heart pounded so hard that he thought something was wrong. After he got home, he even went to see a doctor. The doctor examined him more than once before saying, "Your heart is perfectly healthy." As Cavan walked out of the clinic, he finally understood what had been making it so hard to breathe these past few days. It wasn't his heart. It was Chaya. While Cavan's heart had already begun to lean toward Chaya, the third man she had met through the matchmaking refused to give up. He didn't believe she was seriously ill, and after seeing that she was capable and ran a distillery, he became even more determined. He kept showing up at the distillery. Taking advantage of Ella's encouragement, he pressured Chaya into having dinner with him and kept urging her to drink, even though he knew she had to drive deliveries every night. One afternoon, he sat at a tea stand near the distillery, already drunk, boasting to a few people around him. "That woman Chaya acts like she's hard to get. Tonight I'll have her. I've already talked her into meeting me at a restaurant outside town. Women are easy. Sweet-talk them a little, and they fall for you." Bukayo happened to hear every word. His face turned pale. He hurried away and called Cavan, his voice shaking. "Master Darius, please help my sister-in-law. That guy tricked her into meeting him at a restaurant outside town. He said he's going to force himself on her tonight. I'm too far away. I won't make it there in time." Cavan was in the middle of a meeting. He stood up without another word, walked out, and drove straight there. When he arrived at the restaurant, the man was already drunk, his face flushed with alcohol and jealousy. He had grabbed Chaya by the wrist and refused to let her leave. His words became more and more offensive. "Let go of me," Chaya struggled. "I've already told you I don't have those feelings for you." "What are you doing?" the man laughed. "Why are you making such a fuss? Let's just enjoy the night together." Cavan strode over, knocked the man's hand away, and pulled Chaya behind him. "Let her go." The man lunged at him with a punch. Cavan had trained in self-defense. He shifted aside, caught the man's arm, twisted it behind his back, and forced him to the ground. But in avoiding the blow, he wrenched his lower back. A sharp pain shot through him, though he didn't let it show. He took Chaya with him and left the restaurant. On the drive back, Chaya noticed him frown and brace one hand against his back. Only then did she realize he was hurt. "Your back is hurting? Let me take a look." When they reached the distillery, she asked him to sit down. She rolled up her sleeves, poured a little medicated oil into her hands, and gently rubbed the strained muscles in his back. Her hands were rough from work, but they were warm. Cavan sat there without moving, his thoughts in complete disorder. For 15 years, he had lived like a man guarding a grave. He had never let anyone come this close. "Lean over a little more," Chaya said. "It's swollen here. Why would you get into a fight with someone like that?" The words slipped out before she realized it. For the first time, she had stopped calling him Mr. Darius and simply called him Darius. Cavan noticed it immediately. "Did you just call me Darius?" Chaya's hand stopped. Her face warmed with embarrassment. She was about to go back to the formal Master Darius, but after a brief pause, she lowered her head and continued rubbing the medicated oil into his back. "Well, you're older than I am. Calling you Darius just felt more natural. If you'd rather I didn't, I'll go back to calling you Master Darius." "No," Cavan said softly. "Keep calling me Darius." It was only a small change in the way she addressed him, but from that moment on, the distance between them became noticeably smaller. That night, Cavan lay awake for hours, not because his back hurt, but because he finally admitted to himself that he could no longer deny what was in his heart. Chaya, on the other hand, returned to her room after tending to his injury. She opened the closet and looked at one of Nathan's old jackets. To her, her husband still felt as though he had only left yesterday. She wasn't ready, and she wouldn't allow herself to think about taking even one step beyond those memories. 2 days later, while Chaya was tending the fire beneath a batch of fermenting mash, she heard someone shouting outside, "Come out here! Come see the filthy whiskey you've been selling!" Chaya dropped what she was doing and ran outside. 6 or 7 people had gathered at the gate. Some were longtime distributors, others were customers. One man held his phone up in front of her. A video was playing on the screen. In it, workers wearing uniforms similar to those at Oak and Ember Distillery were dumping moldy black grain into a fermentation vat. Another clip showed yeast being stored beside piles of garbage. Across the bottom of the video appeared the words Oak and Ember Distillery. Chaya turned pale. "That's not my distillery. I swear it isn't. We would never do anything like that. Every shipment of grain we buy is documented. Every batch of yeast is recorded. I have all the records. Where did this video come from? Who made it?" "You're still denying it?" someone shouted. "The video's all over the internet. I sold your whiskey, and now every customer is returning it. Pay me back." One person demanded a refund. Another wanted their deposit returned. Customers who had placed orders for holiday events called one after another to cancel. Even people who had never bought from the distillery stood there pointing at her, saying that a greedy widow would naturally cut corners to make money. Chaya stood in the middle of the gate while people threw accusation after accusation at her. She had no proof in her hands, so she couldn't defend herself. Worse still, that very afternoon the bank called. Chaya, we've decided to suspend the review of your loan restructuring application. There are reports about problems with your products, so we'll have to wait until everything is clarified. We hope you understand." The last thing she had been holding on to was suddenly gone. The news reached Magnolia Grand Hotel almost immediately. Cavan couldn't ignore it. It wasn't only because he cared about Chaya anymore. Oak and Ember was supplying whiskey for the hotel's tasting program. If the distillery's reputation collapsed, the hotel would be affected as well. He went straight to the distillery. Chaya was sitting at a table with her head lowered, dark circles under her eyes after several sleepless nights. When she saw him, she forced herself to stand. "Why did you come? My distillery's already caught up in this. Aren't you worried it'll affect you too?" Cavan looked at her. "First, answer one question. Are you absolutely certain your whiskey is clean?" Chaya met his eyes without hesitation. "I'm willing to stake my life on it. You don't have to believe me, but you can believe the records. You can check every shipment of grain, every batch of yeast, and every production log." Cavan nodded. "Then we'll prove it. Arguing with people at the gate won't solve anything." He didn't throw money at the problem the way many wealthy people would have. Instead, he handled it step by step. He arranged for independent laboratory testing so the results couldn't be questioned. He had every purchase of grain and yeast checked against the records Chaya had kept. He gathered the written quality evaluations from Magnolia Grand Hotel's chefs who had tasted the whiskey before the rumors spread. He also introduced her to an attorney so everything would be handled through the proper legal process instead of fighting with people outside the distillery. As for the tasting agreement, he didn't cancel it. He only put it on hold. "I'm suspending it until the results come back. I'm not terminating our agreement. If your whiskey is as clean as you say, we'll move forward. But if there's really a problem, then we'll have a different conversation." Chaya looked at him, feeling both grateful and overwhelmed. "Thank you. Thank you for not turning your back on me now. I'll never forget it." The days of waiting for the test results felt longer than a month. Chaya barely ate or slept. Ella couldn't bear to watch her daughter waste away. She kept urging her to drink a cup of warm milk or eat a slice of orange, but Chaya couldn't swallow a thing. Nathan's 4 younger brothers were just as restless. Bukayo ran from place to place trying to find the person who had filmed the video. When the test results finally came back, everything became clear. The independent report confirmed that Oak and Ember's whiskey met every safety standard. There was no moldy grain and no contaminated yeast. The video circulating online had been edited together using footage from another location, and Oak and Ember's name had simply been added afterward. The man who made the video was found. He admitted that someone had paid him to do it. The job had come from Dwayne's distillery, but Dwayne was too experienced to take the blame himself. He claimed that one of his employees had acted alone without his knowledge. The moment Chaya heard that, she couldn't hold herself back any longer. Days of humiliation, suspicion, and false accusations burst into anger. She drove straight to Dwayne's distillery. He was entertaining guests when she stormed inside. "Dwayne, you hired someone to make that fake video and ruin my distillery. The truth is out now. Are you still going to deny it? You owe me a public apology." Dwayne remained seated with a faint smile. Do you have any proof that I hired anyone? If one of my employees did something stupid, go talk to him. Don't come in here making a scene. Who do you think you are? Chaya stepped closer. Stop pretending you don't know. You've been jealous of our distillery since Nathan's father's generation. Everyone knows you could never make whiskey as good as ours, so you resorted to dirty tricks instead. Dwayne stood up and looked her up and down with open contempt. A widow whose husband hasn't even been dead that long, living off her late husband's family business. What do you know about making whiskey? Go home and take a good look at yourself. He had struck the deepest wound she carried. But Chaya didn't cry, and she didn't lunge at him. On the table sat a glass of whiskey from his own distillery. She picked it up and threw it onto the floor. The glass shattered. Whiskey splashed across the room. Spoiled whiskey can be poured out, she said. But once a person's character is rotten, it can never be made clean again. Remember that. Dwayne's face turned purple with rage. He started toward her, and several of his men rose from their seats. At that moment, Cavan walked in. The instant he heard Chaya had come there alone, he had driven over. He stepped in front of her and moved her behind him. We're leaving. When they reached the door, Cavan turned back and said only one thing, his voice calm but cold. This isn't over. The law will settle it. You can wait for what's coming. On the drive back, Chaya sat quietly in the passenger seat. Her hands were still trembling. You didn't have to come, she said at last. I could have handled it myself. Cavan glanced at her. Handled it yourself? Your hands are still shaking. You walked into a place full of his people by yourself. What if they decided to do something worse? Did you think about your mother? About Nathan's 4 brothers waiting for you at home? Chaya lowered her head. She didn't answer right away. After a long silence, she spoke softly. I've put up with a lot. People look down on me because I'm poor. They look down on me because I'm a widow. I can live with that. But when they come after Nathan's distillery, when they come after the livelihood of his 4 brothers, I can't stay silent anymore. Cavan looked at her without saying a word. The feelings he carried for this woman grew a little deeper with every passing day. Once Oak and Ember Distillery was cleared of every accusation, people in town began to stand behind Chaya again. The old distributors gradually returned to place orders. Customers who had canceled their purchases called back to apologize and place new ones. Magnolia Grand Hotel officially signed a 3-month supply agreement with Oak and Ember, bringing the distillery's whiskey into its hotel system. Holding the contract stamped with the hotel group's official seal, Chaya went back to the bank. After reading through it, the loan officer smiled and nodded. This changes everything, Miss Chaya. With a contract like this, your distillery has a stable source of revenue. We're approving your loan restructuring request. We'll also extend a new line of credit to help with your operating expenses. Keep up the good work. Chaya stood in front of the bank with the folder in her hands. Tears rolled down her face, yet she couldn't stop smiling. After months of carrying the weight alone, the distillery had finally found its footing again. That evening, she went into the distillery, poured a glass of whiskey, and placed it in front of Nathan's photograph. Nathan, we made it! The distillery is alive again. The bank approved the loan restructuring. I kept our home safe. The whiskey left her feeling a little lighter. Holding the 3-month agreement with Magnolia Grand Hotel, the contract that had saved the distillery from financial collapse, she realized it hadn't appeared on its own. The person who had approved it, the one who had allowed Oak and Ember into the hotel system while the distillery's reputation was still under attack, had been Cavan. She set the papers down, sat quietly for a while, then decided she should thank him properly. She went to his office at the hotel with a small package of local gifts in her arms. She had already rehearsed the words she wanted to say, but before she could speak, Cavan set down his pen and looked straight at her. You don't have to thank me, but there's something I need to tell you. I didn't help you because I felt sorry for you. I helped you because I believed in you, and because I have feelings for you. Chaya froze. The package in her hands suddenly felt much heavier. For a second, she thought she had heard him wrong, but the look in his eyes told her he meant every word. She took half a step back, her voice unsteady. Please, don't say that. Nathan hasn't even been gone a year. I don't have the right to hear something like this. You're making this harder for me. Cavan didn't move closer, and he didn't pressure her. He spoke slowly. I'm not asking you to forget Nathan, and I'm not trying to take his place. I just want you to know that if the day comes when you're exhausted, when the burden becomes too much to carry alone, there will be someone standing beside you. That's all. If you're not ready to think about it, then don't. I can wait. Chaya didn't answer. She set the package on his desk, lowered her head in thanks, and quietly left. On the way home, her thoughts refused to settle. That night, after returning to her room, she opened the closet and took out Nathan's old work jacket. It was the one he used to wear during long nights watching over the whiskey, and it still carried his familiar scent. She held it against her chest and sat alone in the darkness until tears began to fall. She wasn't angry with Cavan. What frightened her was the guilt growing inside her. She told herself she didn't love him. Not yet. But there was one truth she could no longer ignore. Over the past few months, whenever the distillery was in trouble, whenever she had been pushed to the edge, the first person she wanted to call, the first person she wanted to lean on, was no longer Nathan, who lived only in her memories. It was Cavan, who was still beside her in the real world. The moment that thought crossed her mind, fear filled her heart. She pressed her face into Nathan's jacket and whispered, "Nathan, I'm sorry. I haven't forgotten you. I could never forget you." A few days later, Cavan came to pick Chaya up. He didn't tell her where they were going. He simply asked her to come with him. The car stopped at the cemetery gates. Chaya looked at him in surprise. Cavan stepped out carrying 2 bouquets of flowers. He led her to a grave near the back and placed 1 bouquet in front of the headstone. The name engraved on it belonged to his wife, who had passed away 15 years earlier. "This is my wife," he said quietly. 15 years ago, I couldn't protect her. Since then, I've lived like a man guarding a grave, never letting anyone come close. I brought you here because I want you to understand that I'm not saying these things on impulse. He stood silently in front of his wife's grave for a while before turning to Chaya. Together, they walked to Nathan's grave, not far away in the same cemetery. Cavan placed the second bouquet in front of the headstone. He stood straight and spoke to the man beneath the earth as though he were speaking to someone still alive. "Nathan, my name is Cavan. I didn't come here to take your place, because no one ever could. I'm only here to ask for your permission to care for the woman you didn't have enough time to spend a lifetime with. She protected your distillery. She protected your family. She's carried everything on her own until she's almost exhausted herself. From today on, I'd like to carry that burden with her." Chaya stood beside him with both hands covering her face as tears poured down. For months, she had forced herself not to let her heart waver. But hearing those words spoken in front of Nathan's grave, the knot she had carried inside her for so long finally began to loosen. She still wasn't ready to say she loved Cavan, but for the first time, she no longer felt guilty standing beside him. One night, Cavan took Chaya home after they had spent the evening together. It was late when they arrived. Bukayo came out to open the gate. The moment he saw his sister-in-law stepping out of Cavan's car, he stopped in his tracks. He didn't say a word, but he lay awake the entire night. By the next morning, everyone in the house knew. Elijah reacted the strongest. He had always been hot-tempered, letting his emotions get the better of him. He stopped Chaya in the middle of the yard. "What's going on between you and Mr. Darius? Nathan hasn't been gone that long. His grave is still fresh, and you're already seeing another man? Nathan is still alive in our hearts. Chaya." Chaya stood there without moving. His words stung like salt in an open wound. She didn't argue or raise her voice. She simply looked at him. "I've never forgotten Nathan, Elijah. That's exactly why I've stayed until today. If I had forgotten him, I would have left the day my mother came to take me home." Elijah couldn't say another word. He turned and walked away. Mark stood there with his head lowered, unable to speak because he had once been the one who wanted to give Chaya money and send her away. Darius understood her heart better than anyone, but he had never been good with words. He only let out a quiet sigh. A few days later, the 4 brothers invited Cavan to the distillery for dinner. It wasn't simply a meal. Alongside bottles of oak and ember whiskey, Chaya had cooked several of Nathan's favorite dishes herself. Everyone took their seats, and the silence around the table felt heavy. After a few bites, Mark set down his bowl. "Master Darius, we invited you here because there's something we want to ask you. I'll be direct. Please don't take offense. Do you see Chaya as a replacement for your late wife?" Cavan answered without hesitation. "No. My wife will always be my wife. Chaya is Chaya. They're 2 different people. I've never confused them." Elijah spoke again, his tone still sharp. Then can you really accept that she used to be my oldest brother's wife? Can you live with people saying you married another man's widow? Yes, Cavan replied. She was Nathan's wife. That's something to be respected, not hidden. She stayed faithful to a husband she only had 12 days with. That's exactly why I believe she's someone I can trust for the rest of my life. Darius asked his question more quietly. If you marry her someday, will you make her leave the distillery? She's devoted her whole life to that place. Cavan shook his head. No, that distillery is her life's work. It's her home. If I asked her to walk away from it, I wouldn't deserve her love. Bukayo lowered his eyes and asked the last question. What about us? Do you see the four of us as a burden? Cavan laid down his chopsticks. He looked at each of the brothers before answering. I don't need her to forget Nathan. I don't need her to leave this distillery. And the four of you aren't a burden to me. I only want that from now on. Whenever life becomes too hard for her, I'll be allowed to carry some of that burden with her. His answer left the whole table silent. But Elijah still couldn't let go. He poured himself one glass after another until his face turned red. Then he staggered to the family altar, took Nathan's photograph into his arms, and broke down like a little boy. Nathan, after you left, this family fell apart. I'm only afraid that one day nobody in this house will remember you were our oldest brother. Hearing those words, Chaya couldn't hold back any longer. She walked to the altar, dropped to her knees, and spoke through her tears. Listen to me. If you need me to stay in this family as your oldest sister-in-law for the rest of my life, I'll stay. I won't leave. But think about Nathan. If he were still here, would he want to see me living as though I'd died with him? He loved me. He would never want me to spend the rest of my life fading away in this house. The room fell silent. Elijah held Nathan's photograph against his chest, his shoulders shaking. Mark turned his face away to hide his tears. Darius lowered his head. Bukayo sat there with both hands clenched tightly together. Chaya's words opened the door the four brothers had been trying so hard to keep shut. That night, none of them slept. They sat together on the porch outside the distillery until dawn, speaking very little. As the first light of morning appeared, Mark finally broke the silence. Nathan's gone. If we keep Chaya here just to live as his shadow, that's not honoring him. She still has her whole life ahead of her. Darius nodded. Bukayo nodded too. Elijah stayed silent the longest. At last, he let out a slow breath. That morning, the four brothers called Chaya over. Elijah spoke first, though his voice was still thick with emotion. We've thought it through. We want you to find your own happiness, but we have one request. Please wait until Nathan's first memorial anniversary has passed. Let us fulfill that final duty for him. After that, whatever you choose, we'll support you. Chaya looked at the four young men with tears shining in her eyes. She nodded. I will. I owe Nathan a proper first memorial. After that, you don't have to worry about me. One day, Cavan brought Chaya to meet his two children. His son was a doctor, calm and thoughtful by nature. He looked at his father, then at the humble woman standing beside him, and smiled politely. Please make yourself at home. My dad has kept to himself ever since Mom passed away. For years, he couldn't sleep without medication. Seeing him happy again means a lot to me. His daughter, however, reacted very differently. She wasn't openly hostile, but there was unmistakable caution in her eyes. She was afraid her father would forget her mother. She was afraid the place her mother had left behind in this family would be taken by someone else. In her heart, she had already decided who she wanted her father to be with. A university professor, elegant, highly educated, someone she believed belonged in his world, not a woman from a small town who made whiskey for a living. A few days later, that professor was invited to a small gathering at Magnolia Grand Hotel. On the surface, she smiled politely and spoke with perfect manners, but every sentence carried a hidden barb. I heard you run a distillery back home. That must be hard work. People who run small businesses usually know how to calculate every opportunity. I suppose they also know exactly who to hold on to. Chaya understood the insult, but she didn't argue. She only gave a faint smile and let the comment pass. Halfway through the gathering, she stepped out into the hallway for some fresh air. Standing behind a row of large potted plants, she heard voices nearby. Around the corner, the professor was speaking to Cavan's daughter. You need to stop your father. A widow who sells whiskey like her isn't interested in love. She's after your family's money. Honestly, I feel sorry for you. You lost your mother so young, and now your father's blinded by another woman. One day, everything your mother left behind will belong to a stranger, and you'll be left with nothing. Chaya listened until she couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped out from behind the plants and faced the professor. You can look down on me if you want. I'm from a small town, and I make whiskey for a living. You can say whatever you like about me, but don't use a daughter who lost her mother to make yourself look better. If you truly care about her, then speak honestly to her. Don't plant fear and suspicion in her heart and drive her away from her father. The professor's face lost its color. She couldn't think of a single word to answer. Cavan's daughter had heard every word. She had believed Chaya came into their lives to take her mother's place and become her stepmother. Instead, when someone insulted her, Chaya hadn't defended herself first. She had defended the daughter standing in front of her. From that moment on, the wall around the young woman's heart began to soften. After winning over Cavan's children, there was still one final obstacle: the mother of his late wife. Her name was Riley. She had been living overseas, but after hearing that Cavan was planning to remarry, she returned. 15 years had passed since her daughter died, yet the pain had never left her. She couldn't accept Cavan finding love again, and she certainly couldn't accept that the woman was a widow who ran a small-town distillery with such a complicated family behind her. She had heard every rumor people had spread and convinced herself that Chaya was only interested in Cavan's wealth. The first time they met, Riley didn't bother hiding her feelings. She looked straight at Chaya and asked, "Why are you with Cavan? Because he has money. Isn't that it? My daughter may be gone, but this is still her family. Don't think you'll ever take her place." Chaya didn't argue or look offended. She understood that Riley wasn't rejecting her simply because she disliked her. She was afraid that the daughter she loved would be forgotten, afraid another woman would step into the place her daughter had left behind. Chaya knew that fear because she had lost someone she loved too. She lowered her head respectfully. "You have every right to feel that way. I don't blame you for not trusting me. I only hope you'll take good care of your health." As Chaya spent more time around Riley, she began noticing small things that didn't seem right. Riley would ask the same question more than once within a few minutes. She sometimes called Chaya by her daughter's name before suddenly stopping in confusion. Even inside the familiar hotel, she occasionally wandered the hallways, unable to remember which way led back to her room. She would put her medicine into her handbag, then accuse the housekeeper of stealing it. Whenever anyone casually mentioned old age, Riley became unusually upset and irritable. One afternoon, Riley accidentally dropped a bottle of pills in the hallway. Chaya picked it up and read the label. She wasn't a doctor, but she recognized the medication. It was prescribed for people in the early stages of memory loss. Chaya stood there quietly, finally understanding why Riley had been acting so differently. A few days later, Cavan's house was thrown into chaos. Riley had left the house without telling anyone where she was going. Everyone split up to search for her, and Chaya went looking as well. She thought for a long moment before following a different trail. From what she understood about memory loss, people often drifted back to the places tied to their deepest memories. She drove to an old bus station on the outskirts of town where, years ago, Riley had said goodbye to her daughter on the day she left to begin her married life. Sure enough, Riley was sitting alone on a bench, her small figure staring into the distance. When she saw Chaya, she looked up. Her mind was clear one moment and clouded the next. She reached out, took Chaya's hand, and called her by her daughter's name. "There you are. Why were you gone for so long? I've been waiting for you. Come home with me." Chaya didn't correct her. She gently held the frail hand in both of hers and helped her to her feet. "I'm here, Mom. Let's go home. It's getting late, and you'll catch a cold staying out here." She brought Riley home. After they arrived, Chaya made her a cup of warm milk, poured her a glass of warm water, tucked a blanket around her shoulders, and stayed by her side until she began to doze off. She did all of it quietly, without telling anyone, not even Cavan. When Riley became fully aware again, she remembered everything. She remembered calling Chaya by her daughter's name. She remembered letting someone outside the family see her confusion. Embarrassment quickly turned into suspicion. She looked at Chaya and asked, "You know about my illness now, don't you? Are you planning to tell Cavan so he'll feel sorry for me? Is that how you're trying to win him over? Don't even think about it, Chaya shook her head. No, ma'am. I won't tell anyone. I promise. I've lost someone I loved too. I know what it feels like to fear being forgotten, to fear becoming a burden to the people you care about. Your illness is your private matter. Until you want someone else to know, I won't say a single word. Riley looked at her for a long time. The woman she had convinced herself was only after money had become the only person protecting the secret she feared most. From that day on, something inside Riley began to change. Wanting to understand Chaya for herself, Riley went to Oak and Ember Distillery alone one morning without telling Cavan. She didn't announce that she had come. Instead, she stood quietly outside and watched. Chaya had been on her feet since daybreak. She moved from one task to another without stopping. She checked the fermenting mash with Walter, reviewed the order books with Mark, helped Elijah load deliveries onto the truck, went over supplier invoices with Darius, and reminded Bukayo to eat breakfast before heading back out. A little later, Ella arrived carrying a basket filled with food. She called everyone over to eat. Before sitting down herself, Chaya made sure each of the 4 brothers had a full bowl and enough food. Only after everyone else was served did she finally take her own seat. Riley watched the entire scene without saying a word. This wasn't the family she had imagined. No one looked like they had been pushed aside. No one treated Chaya like an outsider. They looked exactly like a family sharing the same home. After lunch, Riley called Chaya aside. The 2 women walked to the back of the distillery, where the scent of fermenting grain lingered in the air. Riley looked at her for a long time before asking, "Tell me something honestly. Why are you still taking care of Nathan's 4 brothers? You could have left this family a long time ago." Chaya smiled softly. "Because I called Nathan my husband, and I called those 4 men my younger brothers. Once someone becomes your family, you don't leave them behind when life gets hard." Riley lowered her eyes. "Even after everything you've suffered?" Chaya nodded. "Even then, family isn't something you keep only when life is easy." Riley stood quietly for a long moment. At last, she reached out and took Chaya's hand. "I was wrong about you." Chaya looked at her in surprise. Riley's voice became much gentler. "I thought you came into Cavan's life because of his money. Now I know I was wrong. My daughter would have wanted someone like you standing beside him." Tears filled Chaya's eyes. She couldn't find the words to answer. She simply held Riley's hand a little tighter. The 2 women who had once stood on opposite sides were finally looking in the same direction. On the morning of Nathan's first memorial anniversary, Chaya was up before dawn, lighting the stove and preparing the memorial meal. A full year had passed since he was gone. The entire Brooks family gathered at Oak and Ember Distillery. Each of the 4 brothers took care of a different task. One cleaned the family altar. Another arranged the fruit offerings. Another prepared the memorial table. Chaya cooked every dish Nathan had loved. She remembered exactly how he liked each one, seasoned, what he liked to eat most, and what he never touched. She worked quietly, wiping her eyes from time to time before returning to the stove. Ella sat on the porch watching her daughter with a sigh. "It's been a whole year already," Chaya answered softly without turning around. "Yes, Mom, a whole year." She didn't dare say anything more because she knew she would start crying again. Near noon, when the memorial meal was finally ready, someone placed a large fruit basket outside the distillery gate. It was Cavan. He knew today was Nathan's first memorial anniversary. He didn't dare walk inside. He was afraid his presence would feel out of place, as though he were intruding on a day meant to honor the man who had come before him. He quietly set the basket down, stood there for a moment, then turned to leave. Bukayo spotted him from the yard and hurried after him. "Calvin, you're here! Why are you leaving? Come inside!" Cavan shook his head. "Not today. This is Nathan's memorial. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to go in. Please take the fruit basket. Consider it my way of offering him my respect." Bukayo caught his arm before he could walk away. "Don't say that. You care about my sister-in-law. You should come inside and pay your respects to my brother. There's nothing inappropriate about that. Please come with me." Cavan hesitated for a moment before following him through the gate. As soon as he stepped into the yard, the atmosphere grew noticeably quieter. The 4 brothers looked at him, unsure how to begin. Cavan stood with both hands folded in front of him, his eyes resting on Nathan's altar. The one who finally broke the silence was Elijah. the brother who had once opposed him the most. Elijah poured a cup of oak and ember whiskey and held it out with both hands. "Calvin, say a prayer for my brother, then share a drink with us." Calvin accepted the cup. Elijah looked toward Nathan's photograph, his voice thick with emotion but steady. "My brother loved Chaya with all his heart. If he were still alive, I don't think he'd want her to spend the rest of her life alone. I think he'd want someone to walk her home when it rains, just like he did the day he brought her home as his wife." Those words were his acceptance. Everyone around the room felt their eyes grow wet. Calvin walked to Nathan's memorial, bowed his head, and offered a quiet prayer before taking the whiskey in one swallow. The familiar warmth spread through him, just like the first cup of oak and ember whiskey Chaya had ever given him. When the ceremony was over, everyone gathered around the table, but Chaya remained standing before Nathan's altar. In her hand was the wedding ring she had worn since the day she became Nathan's wife. A marriage that had lasted only 12 days, though she had continued wearing the ring through an entire year of mourning. She slowly slipped it from her finger and held it carefully in her palm as though it were the most precious thing she owned. She didn't throw it away, and she didn't hide it. She opened the small wooden box on the altar, the one that held Nathan's notebook and the keepsakes he had left behind, and gently placed the ring inside, as though she were laying an entire chapter of her life to rest. Folding her hands, she looked at Nathan's portrait and spoke softly. "Nathan, today marks 1 year since you left. Today, I'm returning the title of being your wife. The wife I was for 12 precious days. I can't hold on to it forever. If I do, I'll spend the rest of my life living as though I died with you, and that's never what you would have wanted. But don't worry, I'm only returning the title. I'll never let go of what we shared. I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. Even when my own time comes, I'll remember that there was once a man named Nathan Brooks who gave me 12 days as his wife and gave me a place to call home." She couldn't finish without breaking down. Tears streamed down her face. The 4 brothers stood behind her, every one of them crying. Elijah cried the hardest, his shoulders shaking. Mark turned away, but his body trembled just the same. Darius lowered his head, tears falling silently to the floor. Bukayo stepped forward and rested a hand on Chaya's shoulder, unable to say a single word. Ella wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. Calvin remained at the very back. He didn't step forward. He didn't interrupt that moment. He understood that he wasn't replacing anyone. Nathan's wife, the woman who had shared only 12 days of marriage with him, would always belong to Nathan. Calvin was simply the man who had come afterward, with Nathan's blessing and with the blessing of this family. Being allowed to stand beside Chaya and walk with her through the rest of her life was already more than he had ever hoped for. The memorial meal that day was the first family gathering in a year where laughter mixed with tears. They shared stories about Nathan while passing dishes around the table. Now and then someone would smile, then fall silent with watery eyes. The weight of mourning that had hung over the family for an entire year finally seemed a little lighter. After the meal, the 4 brothers asked Chaya and Calvin to stay behind. Mark spoke for all of them. "Calvin, Chaya, we've fulfilled our promise. Nathan's first memorial has been properly observed. We won't go back on our word. We won't stand in your way anymore. You and Calvin should start planning your future together. We're truly happy for you," Elijah continued, his voice full of emotion. "Chaya, I said a lot of hurtful things to you before. I'm sorry. I was afraid you'd forget Nathan. But today, when I saw you take off your wedding ring and still keep it with his things, I finally understood. You never forgot him. Go find your happiness. My brother will be at peace knowing that you have." Chaya looked at the 4 brothers as tears welled up in her eyes once more. This time, they weren't tears of heartbreak. She took each of their hands in turn. "Thank you. No matter where life takes me, I'll never forget how all of you accepted me as family." That evening, both families sat together to talk about the wedding. Ella was so happy that she struggled to speak, her eyes shining as she held Riley's hand. Riley, the woman who had once opposed the relationship more fiercely than anyone else, was now the most enthusiastic. "Let's choose a beautiful date for them together," she said. "Chaya has carried enough sorrow for 1 lifetime. It's time she finally gets to be happy." Calvin sat beside Chaya under the lights outside the distillery. A deep sense of peace settled over him. Chaya lifted her eyes toward Nathan's altar one last time before turning to look at the man sitting beside her. One chapter of her life had come to its rightful end. Another was quietly beginning. She no longer felt guilty. She had returned to the past what belonged to the past. Now, she was finally allowed to move forward. After we get married, I want to bring Riley to live with us, Chaya said softly while the two of them were finishing the last few details for their wedding. Riley had already given them her blessing, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Cavan looked up at once. Bring her to live with us? Why would you suddenly think of that? Chaya answered as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She lives alone, and with her memory getting worse, I don't feel at ease. If she's with us, I can look after her. We're her family now. What if she wanders off again? Cavan set down his pen and shook his head. No, Chaya looked at him in surprise. Why not? Because you don't understand her. She spent her whole life protecting her dignity. She'd rather struggle on her own than feel like people are pitying her. If you bring her into our home and spend every day taking care of her, she won't feel loved. She'll feel like she's become a helpless burden. Chaya frowned. How is that making her a burden? I'd be taking care of her because I care about her. Her voice had already grown sharper. She hadn't expected something she believed was the right thing to do would be rejected so firmly. Cavan didn't back down. He had always spoken plainly when he believed something was wrong. Let me ask you something honestly. You finally made it through everything with Nathan's family. You carried 4 younger brothers and a distillery drowning in debt until you were completely worn out. You haven't even had a chance to rest, and now you're looking for another burden to carry. How long are you going to keep doing this to yourself? Chaya stared at him. How can you say that? Riley is your late wife's mother. Looking after her is the right thing to do. I'm trying to help you, and you're criticizing me for it? Cavan answered calmly. I'm not criticizing you for caring about her. I'm questioning the way you care. You keep taking every burden onto your own shoulders. You act as though carrying everyone else's problems is your responsibility. If you aren't sacrificing yourself, you don't feel at peace. Have you ever let someone else carry you for a change? Chaya stood up, her face flushed. Then what do you expect me to do? Ignore her? Pretend nothing's happening and leave her alone? Is that the kind of person you are? You say you loved your wife for 15 years, yet you're willing to leave her mother on her own? I don't understand you. That struck Cavan's deepest sense of pride. He stood up as well, his voice rising. Don't bring my late wife into this. I have never abandoned Riley. I take care of her in the way she wants to be cared for. I want her to keep her dignity, not feel like someone who's become helpless because people are constantly hovering over her. And you, he paused before continuing, you always have to be the one doing everything, always sacrificing, always carrying everyone else. Have you ever asked yourself why? They stood facing each other, neither willing to give in. After so many peaceful days together, this was their first real argument. Chaya felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't understand why you've turned this into such a big issue. I only wanted to do something good. Cavan looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but every word landed harder than before. Chaya, answer me honestly. You care about everyone. You cared for Nathan. You cared for his 4 brothers. You care for your mother. You even care about my late wife's mother. You carry everyone's burdens. You solve everyone's problems. But have you ever cared for yourself? Have you ever allowed yourself to rest? Have you ever allowed someone else to take care of you, even once? Chaya froze. His question pierced the deepest place in her heart, the place she had spent her whole life avoiding. She couldn't answer because she knew he was right. Ever since she was young, she'd believed she only had value when she was sacrificing herself for someone else. She was 45 before she got married. Her husband died after only 12 days. She stayed behind and carried his family not only because she loved them, but because somewhere deep inside she was afraid. Afraid that if she stopped giving, stopped sacrificing, no one would need her anymore, that she would become nobody. She had spent her life proving she deserved to exist by carrying everyone else's burdens. Cavan had seen the truth and spoken it aloud. It hurt more than anything she had ever heard. Without another word, she turned around and walked away. A few days later, after hearing the whole story from her former son-in-law, Riley asked Chaya to come see her. Chaya was still upset. She sat quietly without saying a word. Riley poured her a cup of tea before speaking. You were planning to bring me to live with you after the wedding, weren't you? Chaya nodded. Yes, I thought you'd be better off with us. I'd feel more at ease knowing I could look after you. Riley smiled gently. I know you truly care about me, but listen to me for a moment. I'm old now, and my memory isn't what it used to be. The thing I fear most isn't getting sick. It's becoming a burden to my children. It's seeing pity in their eyes. If you bring me into your home and spend every day taking care of me like I'm a child, I won't be able to live with myself. Chaya looked up in surprise. But if I leave you on your own, I'll never stop worrying. Riley reached over and patted her hand. Taking care of someone doesn't always mean bringing them into your life and carrying them on your shoulders every day. Sometimes, respecting the way they want to live and protecting their dignity is also a form of love. If you care about me, then respect my choice. Chaya lowered her eyes without speaking. Riley continued, Calvin understands that. That's why he tried to stop you. He isn't cold-hearted, Chaya. She held Chaya's hand a little tighter. There's something else he told you that was absolutely right. You spend your life worrying about everyone else, but you never worry about yourself. If you keep carrying everything alone, one day you'll collapse. And when that day comes, who will carry you? Chaya's eyes slowly filled with tears. Riley smiled kindly. This time, you're getting married to someone who wants to take care of you. You need to learn how to let someone love you. Do you understand, my dear? The way Riley called her, my dear, made Chaya's eyes turn red. She nodded quietly. Riley's words stayed with Chaya long after she left. That evening, she went to Calvin's house. She stood outside the door for a long time before finally finding the courage to knock. Calvin opened the door and stopped when he saw her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Chaya broke the silence first. I'm sorry. I lost my temper the other day. I said things I shouldn't have said. I never should have brought your late wife into our argument. I was wrong. Calvin gently led her inside and helped her sit down. I was wrong too. I spoke too bluntly. I know my words hurt you. He looked at her quietly before continuing. But I wasn't trying to criticize you. I said those things because I care about you. You've spent your whole life carrying everyone else. I don't want you to spend the rest of it doing the same. From now on, let me carry some of that weight with you. Chaya lowered her head. I've lived that way for so long that I don't know any other way. I'm used to doing everything myself. I'm used to believing I only have value when I'm sacrificing something for someone else. She looked up at him with eyes still red from crying. Riley told me the same thing you did. She said, I have to learn how to let someone love me. A small smile appeared on Calvin's face. He reached over and took her hand. Then let's agree on something. We'll still take care of Riley, but we'll do it the way she wants. She'll stay in her own home. We'll make sure she has all the help she needs, and we'll visit her together, bring her medicine, and spend time with her. We'll love her by respecting her, not by making her feel like she's become someone else's burden. Chaya nodded gently. All right, I'll listen to you. They looked at each other, and the anger that had lingered between them over the past few days quietly disappeared. Outside, their wedding day was only a few days away. On the final day of wedding preparations, both families gathered to settle the last remaining details. They went back and forth for quite a while without reaching an agreement. Calvin wanted to give Chaya a proper wedding. He wanted to invite everyone they knew and let the world see that from this day forward, Chaya was his wife. No one would ever look down on her again. Ella agreed immediately. She's suffered enough in this life. This wedding should be as grand as possible to make up for everything she's been through. But Chaya gently shook her head. Mom, Calvin, I don't need a big wedding. I don't need people to see me as the wife of a wealthy hotel owner. I only want my mother, Nathan's 4 brothers, Calvin's 2 children, Riley, the workers from the distillery, and the people who truly care about us. As long as the people who matter see that I'm loved, that's enough for me. Ella started to argue, then stopped after seeing the look in her daughter's eyes. She understood. Chaya wasn't chasing appearances anymore. After everything life had put her through, all she wanted was the warmth of a real family. Around the same time, Dwayne's case finally came to an end. The authorities confirmed that he had been behind the fabricated video used to smear Oak and Ember Distillery. He was held responsible. Business partners abandoned him, his distillery quickly declined, and from then on, he never regained his footing. Everything else seemed settled, yet one thing left Calvin unexpectedly nervous: proposing. All his life, he had been decisive. He was used to making difficult decisions without hesitation, but asking one woman to marry him left him feeling like an awkward young man. He bought a ring, then put it away. He rehearsed what he wanted to say, then decided it sounded too sentimental. He worried it wouldn't be special enough. Chaya noticed him acting strangely and quickly guessed what he was trying to do. One afternoon, she led him outside to the old delivery truck they had used for countless whiskey shipments. "Open the back," she said. Cavan looked at her in confusion but did as she asked. Inside, she had placed a small wooden sign. Written across it in her own simple handwriting were the words, "Cavan, will you grow old with me?" Cavan read the sign, then looked at her. The man who had kept his heart closed for 15 years suddenly found his eyes filling with tears. "I've wanted that for a long time." A few days before the wedding, Cavan brought the traditional engagement gifts to Ella's home. Everything was prepared properly, allowing Ella to proudly welcome relatives and neighbors. But for Nathan's 4 brothers, Cavan had prepared something different. Not expensive gifts meant to impress them, but things that would truly help. He signed a long-term contract with Oak and Ember Distillery, bringing its whiskey into every Magnolia Grand Hotel property and giving the distillery a stable future. He established an education fund for Darius's son in the Brooks family's name, making it clear it wasn't charity but something meant for the family's next generation. He arranged legal assistance to help Mark resolve the debts that had weighed on him for years. He introduced Elijah to an event production contract within Magnolia Grand's hotel network so he could return to the work he loved. And he bought Bukayo a high-quality hearing aid so he could hear clearly again. The 4 brothers looked at everything in silence. Cavan spoke quietly. "Don't think I'm using money to take Chaya away from this family. That's not why I'm doing this. I only want to make sure she doesn't have to carry all of your burdens alone anymore. She cares about every one of you. I want to care about all of you the same way." Mark lowered his head. "Calvin, there was a time we didn't treat Chaya the way we should have. After everything you're doing for us now, we don't know how we'll ever repay you," Cavan smiled. "There's nothing to repay. Family takes care of family. That's all." Only then did the 4 brothers truly accept him. They finally understood that he hadn't come to take their sister-in-law away. He had come to stand beside them and care for the woman they all owed so much. The night before the wedding, Chaya called Nathan's 4 brothers together. She reached into her pocket and slowly took out a key. It was the key to Oak and Ember Distillery, the same key Bukayo had placed in her hands on the day she married Nathan. She gently laid it in front of them. "I'm giving the distillery key back to all of you," she said. "From now on, the 4 of you will run the distillery together. I'm not leaving Oak and Ember. I'll still come back. I'll still work beside all of you. But I won't be the one carrying everything alone anymore. You've all grown up. It's time for each of you to stand on your own feet." Bukayo accepted the key with trembling hands, his voice caught in his throat. "Chaya, hearing you say that, it feels like you're about to leave us forever." Chaya smiled through tears and gently shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere far. I'm only moving into another home." She looked around the distillery one more time, then back at the 4 young men who had become her family. "But this place will always be my home too." The house was bustling before sunrise on the morning of the wedding. The makeup artist had arrived. The wedding dress was hanging and ready. But no matter where they looked, they couldn't find the bride. Everyone began searching in a panic. Ella's eyes were already red. "Where's Chaya? Why isn't she here at a time like this? Don't tell me she's changed her mind and doesn't want to get married." Bukayo quickly tried to calm her down. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly realized where she would be. "Don't worry. I know where she is." He led his 3 brothers straight to Oak and Ember Distillery. The door was slightly open. Inside, Chaya sat quietly among the aging barrels, still wearing her everyday clothes. Beside her lay Nathan's old jacket and a fresh bottle of whiskey from the newest batch. She hadn't run away. She had simply wanted to spend a little more time in the place that had carried her through the hardest year of her life. When she saw the 4 brothers walk in, she looked up. Her eyes were still wet, but she smiled. "You came to pick me up?" she asked softly. "I'll come right away." She stood and slowly looked around the distillery one last time before turning back to them. "Starting tomorrow, I won't be your sister-in-law by title anymore. But if any of you ever need me, I'll still be family. Promise me you'll always remember that." Elijah was the first to cry. He wiped at his eyes. "Don't say things like that, Chaya. You'll always be our sister. A title can't change that." Mark stepped forward and lowered his head. "Chaya, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every selfish thing I ever did, and for every time I wanted to send you away. Darius quietly picked up her wedding bag and held it for her. Bukayo reached out his hand. "Come on, Chaya, let's go. Everyone's waiting for you." When it came time for the bride to walk down the aisle, it wasn't her father who escorted her. It wasn't Ella alone either. It was Nathan's 4 brothers. The 4 men who had once begged her to stay, who had once tried to send her away, who had once struggled to accept her finding happiness again, were now the very ones leading her into a new chapter of her life. They walked beside her with straight backs, smiling through their tears. Sitting below were Ella, Riley, Cavan's 2 children, the workers from Oak and Ember Distillery, and everyone who had witnessed Chaya's long journey through grief. Even Cavan's daughter, who had once kept her distance from Chaya, now stood wiping away tears. Cavan waited at the end of the aisle. When the 4 brothers placed Chaya's hand into his, he gently slipped a new wedding ring onto her finger and spoke in a calm, warm voice. "I won't promise to make you forget your past. Your past is part of who you are, and I respect it. I only promise that from now on, whenever you look back, you won't have to stand there alone anymore." Chaya looked up at him, smiling through her tears. "I'm not coming to you with an untouched heart either. There will always be a place inside me for the man I lost. But everything that's left, I want to give to you." After the wedding, life settled into a steady rhythm once again. Oak and Ember Distillery was alive with activity. Nathan's 4 brothers worked side by side, sharing the responsibility of running the family business. Under the long-term agreement, Oak and Ember whiskey was now served throughout the entire Magnolia Grand Hotel chain. Even so, every batch was still made the same way it had been for 3 generations, by hand, without cutting corners or changing the family's traditional recipe. Chaya never became the distant, elegant hotel owner's wife that people had imagined. She still returned to the village. She still rolled up her sleeves at the distillery, checked the fermentation, and scolded Nathan's brothers whenever they got careless. After scolding them, she would patiently show them how to do it properly. On quiet days, she went home to cook for Ella, sitting beside her mother cleaning vegetables while listening to her familiar complaints. Somehow, those ordinary moments filled her heart with warmth. Cavan had changed too. He no longer lived like a man guarding a grave. He still visited his late wife. He still brought flowers to her grave and stood there in silent remembrance. But that place was no longer the only home his heart knew. He no longer needed sleeping pills to make it through the night. One afternoon, Cavan drove to Oak and Ember to pick up his wife. He stood outside the gate and watched Chaya moving among the whiskey barrels, her sleeves dusted with grain, a few loose strands of hair falling across her face. She looked up, wiped her hands on her apron, and waved with a smile. "You're back. Come over here and taste this new batch. Tell me if it's as good as the old one." Cavan walked into the yard, accepted the cup she handed him, and took a sip. The familiar warmth of the whiskey spread through him again, the same flavor that had brought a lonely man back to life. He looked at the woman standing before him, the woman who had been someone's wife for only 12 days, who had carried an entire family through a year of sorrow, and who was now standing here beneath the golden afternoon sun. "It's good," he said softly. "Even better than before." Chaya laughed as she took the cup back from him. "Are you complimenting the whiskey? Or the woman who made it?" Cavan smiled. "Both." He gently led her over to sit beside him on the stone step outside the distillery while the whiskey continued aging quietly inside. She had spent 12 days as one man's wife, then an entire year carrying a family's burdens alone. Now, at last, she had a home she no longer had to protect by herself. A home where someone stood beside her, carrying it with her. The late afternoon sunlight slipped through the doorway and rested on their hair, now touched with silver, warm as the last sip of whiskey they had just shared. And with that, Chaya's story comes to an end. But a new chapter of her life is only just beginning. For years, she had always been the one carrying everyone else's burdens, believing that if she stopped sacrificing herself, no one would ever need her again. In the end, she realized that love isn't about carrying every weight alone. Sometimes, true happiness is simply having someone willing to carry it with you. Chaya never walked away from Nathan's family. Instead, she brought new life into that home. A new brother for the 4 young men, someone who would stand beside them as they grew into the people they were meant to become. And as for Chaya, the woman who had spent her entire life living for everyone else, she finally learned how to live for herself. and found the home where she no longer had to carry everything alone.